Philippines is back in the global spotlight as a rift between the president and local news website Rappler draws public outrage over what some are claiming is an attack on press freedom. US-based magazine The Economist called the Philippines a flawed democracy with a partly free press. Similarly, the Japan Times wrote about fears of an alleged assault on free press, while the British daily newspaper The Guardian called it an alarming attempt to silence independent journalism. So today we tackle this very topic, specifically the SEC's ruling revoking the registration of Rappler and whether or not this was a political move to silence the critics of those in power. Hello, I'm Mikey Oreta. You're watching Square Off, Season 15, The Firm Debates.
ID ko, tapos sinabi niya, hindi po kayo pwede pumasok today talaga. Tapos tinanong ko, ako lang po ba yung may, parang is the instructions just for me? Tapos sabi niya, opo, sa inyo lang po. Tinanong ko, saan po galing yung order? Sabi niya, galing sa itaas.
This is just the latest in a string of unpleasant encounters between Malacanang and news website Rappler.
Would it be the policy of Malacanang to bar reporters who publish unsavory reports from Malacanang?
No, I don't think the issue is unsavory reporting. The issue is fake news.
In January, the Securities and Exchange Commission ordered the closure of the news agency, citing a violation of the constitutional restriction on foreign ownership of mass media when Rappler sold Philippine depository receipts that came with a veto power to foreign entities. Rappler is crying harassment.
A PDR is not equivalent to ownership. It's really a financial instrument. They're able to put in money, and then if we become profitable, then they collect from the investment. But so day-to-day operations, they have no say. They can't tell us, you're not supposed to run this story or you should run this story. No interference at all in editorial.
Requiring the PDR holders consent to the amendments of the Articles of Incorporation and amendments of bylaws. Hindi ka nga stockholders, pero meron kang ganitong karapatan.
Omidyar Network has absolutely no power, and that clause was put in there specifically so that they make sure we tell them what we're doing.
The New York Times slams the move as an assault on the president's media critics. But Malacanang is firm, it's nothing personal, it's the law.
Ayan ang mahirap. Pag nasilip kayo na mayroon pala kayong butt of the matter, sabihin naman ninyong harassment. Kalukuhan.
So, is the revocation of Rappler's certificate of registration a violation of the constitutional right to free speech and press freedom?
On Wednesday, Omidyar, the US-based entity that received the PDRs in question, announced that it was donating its $1.5 million investment in Rappler to 14 Filipino managers, including founder Maria Ressa. But Omidyar and Ressa clarified that the donation is not an admission of any wrongdoing. Now, arguing for the affirmative side is the pamantasan ng lungsod ng Maynila. Driven by wisdom, prosperity, and honor, the future lawyers from the pamantasan ng lungsod ng Maynila.
I took up law school where I was encouraged by my family and to further my education. At first, I was a bit hesitant. In the process, gradually, I was able to conquer my doubts and fears. So, trust the process always.
People come across I'm serious because I'm very quiet all the time. So, being quiet gives me a lot of time to think. It was a personal decision because since I took up political science in college, I really think there's nowhere else to go but law.
First, I took up law school because lawyers appear to be so intellectual that they seem to be epitome of know-it-all persons. I just wanted to be like them. As I pursued my study, it's more than that. It's being an instrument of justice, giving what other people deserve.
Team Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. Committed, fierce, resilient. And taking on the negative side is the Arellano University. From the institution guided by truth and respect for academic freedom, the new breed of lawyers from Arellano University.
I am passionate about the things I do and also committed and loyal. I took up law school for my family and also for those people who cannot protect themselves.
I'm passionate and determined. I go after what I want in life. I wanted to be a human rights advocate and be the voice of the people who don't stand up for themselves.
I took up law school to make my parents proud and to make my family proud and to make my province proud. Lawyering has, I think, been the dream of my father, and this is me doing that for him.
Team Arellano University. Benevolent, passionate, honest. Let's now meet our distinguished judges. First off, we have attorney Rochelle Ann Pomoy, a junior associate at the VNA Law Firm. Next, we have attorney Rene Pilapil Jr., a professor at the DLSU College of Law. He's also the head of legal affairs at ACDI Multipurpose Cooperative. And presiding as our chief adjudicator is Judge Mervin Jovito Samadan from the Regional Trial Court Branch 40 in Dagupan City. We're using a modified Oregon-Oxford format. The debate is between two sides, the affirmative and the negative, with 3 members each. Each debater from the affirmative side argues the necessity, beneficiality, and practicability of the proposition, while the counterpart debaters on the negative side oppose these arguments. Each debater is given 4 minutes to deliver a constructive speech and rebut the previous argument. Each debater is given 2 minutes to interpolate or cross-examine the opposing debater. Only categorical questions may be asked. Each of the judges may ask 1 question of each speaker within that speaker's time limit. The judges score each team in terms of manner, matter, and interpolation. The team with a higher score from each judge gets a point. The team with the most number of points wins the debate. The chief adjudicator rules in the event of ties, objections, or contestations. Tonight's proposition. Let it be resolved that the revocation of Rappler's certificate of registration is a violation of the constitutional right to free speech and press freedom. First up, for the affirmative side, we have Nikki. Nikki, you've got 4 minutes to tell us why the revocation of Rappler's certificate of registration is indeed a violation of press freedom.
The freedom to comment on public affairs is essential to the vitality of representative democracy. Good evening, Your Honors. This debate is a constitutional issue involving 2 guaranteed freedoms, free speech and free press. The affirmative side remains firm that the SEC decision is an overkill against Rappler, being tainted with unconstitutional motive, partiality, and strong bias. Rappler's persecution follows a clear pattern under this administration. In the President's State of the Nation address, it was claimed that Rappler's is owned by the Americans. Months later, SEC issued a decision revoking Rappler's certificate of registration based on an investigation requested by Soljan Khalida. And just recently, Your Honors, a Rappler's journalist was banned from entering Malacanang. Your Honors, it is necessary that Rappler's free speech and free press be upheld by striking down the SEC decision which arbitrarily revoked certificate of registration. 2 points, Your Honor. First, the SEC decision is arbitrary, and second, SEC decision is an excessive exercise of state power resulting to prior restraint. Now on to my first point. SEC decision is an arbitrary exercise of the state power. Consider, Article 16, Section 11, Paragraph 1 of the Constitution provides that ownership and management is limited to citizens of the Philippines. No word control is found in that text of the law. Yet SEC applied its own definition of control, which is contrary to the very existing jurisprudence found in Gamboa versus Teves, which says that control refers to the possession of Filipinos of controlling interests and shares entitled to vote in the election of the directors. Your Honors, we would like to emphasize that there are actually two separate corporations involved here, Raptors Incorporated and Raptors Holding Corporation. And it was actually Raptors Holding Corporation which issued the PDR and that Raptors Incorporated. Thus, Your Honor, up until this moment, Raptors Incorporated itself owned and managed 100% by Filipinos and 100% controlled by them. Now, assuming without conceding that the SEC decision is in accordance with law, we still believe that it is necessary to strike it down, for it is an excessive exercise of state power. Consider, under the intermediate test found in Chavez versus Gonzalez, the Supreme Court held that speech restraints in the form of control-neutral regulation amounts to prior restraint if the incident restriction is greater than is needed for the furtherance of the state interest. Your Honor, in this case, the state interest in foreign equity ownership for mass media corporations was already upheld by voiding the immediate PDR. Thus, the revocation of Rappler's certificate of registration was actually not called for it's like killing the corporation twice and involuntarily dissolving it, thus trampling Rappler's free speech and free press. Your Honor, yes, Your Honor.
Isn't if there is any regulation, isn't it considered a content neutral one?
Your Honor, we must distinguish the same. For when it is control neutral regulation, it refers to time and manner of publishing such speech, Your Honor. If you may allow me to continue, Your Honor. After all, a democracy without a strong, free, and active press is problematic. And the day that the government tells us what to say and what not to say is the day that we exist.
And 2 minutes to cross-examine Nikki.
Good evening, Ms. Speaker. Good evening, Your Honors. Let me first start off with this question, right? So in the case, have you read the case of Rappler versus Andy Bautista of the Comelec? Are you familiar with the content-based regulation and content-neutral regulation was distinguished in this case? However, Ms. Speaker, would you agree with me that in this case, in this particular motion, what is at issue is not the suppression of the freedom of expression and press freedom, but the revocation of the SEC? My question is, would you still say that there is prior restraint when the basis of the SEC decision is the violation of the Constitution and the violation of pertinent laws? Yes or no? Yes or no only, Ms. Speaker?
Qualified no.
No. So I'll take that as a yes. That's an admission on your part. There is no prior restraint in this case.
There is.
Let me move on to my second question. Right? Have you read the Constitution? Would you say you have a mastery of the Constitution? Under the Constitution, you quoted the provision, right? That mass media must be wholly owned and managed by citizens of the Philippines or corporations which are wholly owned and managed by citizens, right?
You heard me earlier, right?
But would you agree with me that the word control is an exercise of ownership?
No.
Yes or no, Miss? Yes or no, Miss Speaker? Control is an exercise of ownership. Yes or no, Miss Speaker? I would take that as a yes. So next question. Under the have you read the SRC?
Yes.
Securities and Regulation. Right. So under the SRC, SEC is authorized, right, to impose sanctions if it finds violations of the pertinent laws. The Corporation Code, right? The Securities and Regulations Code, the Constitution.
So what's the question?
Right? So you're saying that the decision is is arbitrary, but in fact it is based on law, right? Would you agree with me on that?
But there are other
Have you read the decision? Have you read the decision? Yes or no? Have you read the decision? Yes or no? Yes. No. In that decision, it was extensively discussed, right? That all the basis used by SEC was enumerated in the particular decision.
But there are
so it is wrong. Would you agree with me? It is wrong to say that it is arbitrary because it is.
Okay, Anne, you've got 4 minutes now to advance your argument on why the revocation of Rappler's certificate of registration need not be seen as a violation of the constitutional right to free speech and free press. Go ahead.
Good evening, Your Honors, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. We would like to emphasize that the core issue in this debate is whether this singular action against a single entity, which is based on valid and legal grounds, constitutes a violation of Rappler's freedom of speech and press freedom. The negative side submits that the SEC's decision is necessary in order to protect and uphold our sovereignty and to respect the mandate of the Constitution. Firstly, Rappler Inc. and Rappler Holdings are mass media entities, and as such, they are subject to nationalization requirements. Under the Constitution, it puts a premium on the reservation of certain areas of investment to citizens of the Philippines or to organizations wholly owned and managed by such citizens, and this includes mass media. The Foreign Investments Act of 1991, as amended, also embodies this policy. The citizenship requirement is intended to prevent the use of such facilities by aliens to influence public opinion. The reason for this, yes, Your Honor.
Madam Speaker, do you consider Rappler as part of mass media?
Yes, Your Honor. They are covered by the doctrine of Estopel because in Rappler versus Andres Bautista, they also wrote an article and they have consistently represented themselves to the public as a mass media entity. If I may proceed. The reason for this nationalization is that mass media must be free from foreign influence. It is clothed with public interest and plays a critical role in shaping public perception. We have seen what happened in Latin America, in the UK, and more recently in the US. Certain Russian individuals have been indicted for interfering with the US elections by infiltrating social media sites and permanently sowing seeds of discord. Your Honor, yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Speaker, you mentioned a while ago that Rappler Holdings is considered as a mass media
Yes, Your Honor.
corporation. Is this your position that
Yes,
they
Your
are
Honor.
considered a mass media outfit?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honors, the dangers we face now is more real than imagined. If we let these foreign entities to permeate our mass media outlets, we are exposing ourselves to attacks on our sovereignty. Secondly, the revocation is not in violation of Rappler's constitutional right to free speech and press freedom. The revocation of a corporate franchise is a valid exercise of police power and regulation by the state. In O'Brien, a government regulation is held to be valid if first, it is within the constitutional power of the government, second, if it furthers an important or substantial governmental interest, and third, the governmental interest is unrelated to the suppression of free expression, and fourth, the incidental restriction on the freedom is no greater than essential to the furtherance of that interest. First, the SEC's revocation was well within its statutory power under the SRC upon its finding of a violation of existing laws. Second, it is the state's substantial governmental interest to shield the mass media from foreign influence and control, which will affect public perception on matters which affect society at large. Third, this decision did not amount to the suppression of Rappler's freedom of expression. And lastly, the evil sought to be prevented is more pressing than the incidental consequence of the revocation. Your Honors, I would like to close my arguments by posing this question. Do we really want to sit on our laurels while we let this immediate danger unfold before our very eyes? Or do we act on it and protect our national interest and shield ourselves from control and influence from external sources before it even begins? Thank you and good evening.
2 minutes for the cross-examination.
Hi, Ms. Speaker.
Hi.
I take it that you are familiar with the prohibition on foreign equity ownership, correct?
Yes, very much so.
All right, so the provision makes use of the word ownership and management, correct?
Yes, but control is a form
Would you
of
agree with
is an
me that
exercise of
control
ownership.
is nowhere found in the text of the law?
It does. You don't have to
All right,
take it
yes or
too
no, Ms.
literally.
Speaker? Yes or no?
Well, if you
Yes
take
or
it
no?
that way, then no.
All right, I would take it as that. Yes. Yet the SEC interpreted the provision to mean control, right?
Control is an exercise of
Have
ownership.
you read Gamboa
You
versus
cannot own,
Tevez?
yes, you
Have
cannot
you
own
read?
something and
All
not
right, so in
exercise
that
control
decision,
over it.
the
That
Supreme
is just
Court,
plain
respect
common
my
sense,
time.
Ms.
It's my
Speaker.
time, Speaker. The Supreme Court interpreted control as one derived from ownership of stocks entitling the holder to participate in the management of the corporations, correct?
Correct.
Do you agree with the Supreme Court?
Well, the
Do
Supreme
you
Court,
agree with the
the
Supreme Court?
in
Do you
Gamboa
agree
versus
with the
Tevez
Supreme
held
Court, Ms. Speaker?
that
Yes or
control
no?
and,
Yes or
and,
no? All right,
and
so
beneficial
are you
ownership
familiar
constitutes-
with the wordings of Immediate PDR?
Yes.
It is contained in clause 12.2 and 12.2.2, right? Which states that there is a need for consent of a mediator before changing Rappler's articles, correct?
Well, that is necessarily
Are you
exercising
aware
control.
What is
right?
the provision called? Are you aware of what is the provision called?
Enlighten me.
All right, you should have studied it.
I have, but
that is a
feel free,
veto
it's your
clause.
time, like you said, right?
I suppose you haven't read Rocco
I
versus
have.
Rongmeier. All right, I will enlighten you. In that case, the Supreme Court categorically stated that veto clause does translate to ceding control.
If you read the provision...
Next question. Are you aware that aside from Rapplers, there are other media companies that also issue PDR like ABS-CBN?
Of course.
Okay, so therefore you would agree with me that should this
But what is
SEC
contained in
decision
the PDRs of
be
ABS
upheld,
and GMA
we
is
will
not
no
the same
longer
conditions
have this
which is
debate
present
on
in
national
Rappler's
television.
PDRs. It is
No
not the
further
same.
questions, Your Honor.
Let's hear from the second affirmative speaker. Irvin, you've got 4 minutes to tell us why it would be beneficial to consider the revocation of Rappler's registration certificate as a violation of free speech and press freedom.
I may not agree with what the negative is saying. However, I would defend the right to say it even up to death. Your Honors, good evening. First rebuttal. There is irregular piercing of the corporate veil. Your Honors, this is a complete deviation from the general rule that each corporation enjoys separate juridical personalities. So Rappler Holdings Incorporated is different from Rappler Incorporated. Now, on to my arguments, Your Honors. We submit that it is beneficial to strike the SEC decision based on 2 grounds. First, it will foster a strong and independent Philippine press. And second, we will prevent broadcast companies from a systematic attack of government. Your Honors, first argument. It will foster a strong and independent Philippine press. Your Honor, let me begin by giving you with figures. Rappler Incorporated has 3.5 million followers on Facebook, 2.9 million followers on Twitter. 90 to 97% of the articles being published by Rappler Incorporated are not limited to local celebrities. These are news of public significance. Therefore, Rappler Incorporated is an avenue whereby news contributors may initiate public discourse, where they convey public sentiment, and third, where they can actually expose government lapses. Your Honor,
how does the Mr. Speaker, how does the revocation of the certificate of registration affect Rappler's following online, as well as its ability to publish articles online?
Your Honors, when a corporation is being ordered to be revoked, its only limited duty is to liquidate. And in this particular context, because you killed the corporation, you already killed its freedom of expression. Now, Your Honors, let me proceed. Because of this revocation, Rappler Incorporated was subjected to a prior restraint. In Grosjean versus American Press Company, held that there need not to be a total suppression. A minimal restriction on circulation of published news is a censorship. In Burgos versus Chief of Staff, it was held that any discontinuance in news publication is a prior restraint. Your Honors, what happened in the particular case is more than just a restriction on publication. It was more than just a discontinuance in news publication. What happened here is a complete and absolute denial of a fundamental freedom. Therefore, reversing the SEC decision will uphold a press free from political biases and will negate the inability of the government to accept dissent. At the end of the day, a great dissenter is essential to keeping the government accountable to its people. Your Honor's second argument, it protects broadcasting companies from systematic attacks of government. Your Honor, right in this very moment, ANC Square Off gives us this opportunity to convey public opinion and communicate dissent. Consider this, Your Honors. ABS-CBN Incorporated has a similar ABS-CBN Incorporated holdings company. This holding company also issues PDR similar to that of Rappler Holdings Incorporated. Now let's drive along EDSA. GMA Network Incorporated has a similar holding company which also issues these PDRs. Now my point, Your Honors, is that what does this imply? This very company that gives us this opportunity to communicate dissents and shape public knowledge may be subject to future press censorship. This is a chilling effect, Your Honor. As innocent as we are affected by the SEC decision. The design is clear, and this is the procedure that the negative espouses. First, you trace a violation through the depositary receipt, and then second, you impute fraud, and then pierce the corporate veil, and third, final hammer, revoke the incorporation.
2 minutes for the cross-examination.
Good evening, Your Honors. Mr. Speaker, have you read SEC Memorandum Circular 8, Series of 2013?
Yes.
Was it published in the SEC website and other newspaper of general circulation?
Enlighten me. What's your question, Ms. Speaker?
I told you that I asked you, was it published in the SEC website and other newspaper of general circulation?
Enlighten me, Ms. Mayor. Was it?
There is a problem with your research. Were you able to access it online?
Of course.
The Section 4 of the said circular provide for a curative period for corporation
Correct. Why immediate revocation when there is actually
to comply with the
is
Philippine
period?
equity requirement?
This is arbitrary
Yes or no?
exercise of
Yes
state
or
power.
no?
So
I
there
take
is
it
a
as
curative
yes.
period.
Was this
So
curative
you
period
admitted that
1
there
year
is a
long
curative
from the
period.
effectivity of the circular?
So in effect, there is still a
Yes
curative
or
period.
no?
We're talking here
This
of a
is a
mass media
categorical
company.
question. I
This
take it as a yes.
This
This
is the
curative
only
period
nationalized
end on
activity
May
where
2014.
fundamental freedom is involved.
Yes or no?
That's the question.
Did this curative period end on May 2014, a year after the effectivity of the circular?
Couldn't it
Yes or
be
no?
done again?
Yes or no,
it
Mr.
did,
Speaker?
but couldn't it
Did
be done
Rappler
again?
issue PDRs to On-Media on October 2015?
But couldn't be the memorandums?
Yes or no?
Was that?
Yes or no?
Can
I
the
take it as a
memorandum
yes. Did
circular be
Rappler
done
issue
again?
PDRs to On-Media after the curative
It
period?
can be done. The memorandum circular can be done
Yes or
again.
no,
Why
Mr.
not
Speaker?
do it? Why not do it now? Why,
Yes
why
or no? I
immediate
take it as a yes.
revocation?
Therefore, Your Honor and ladies and gentlemen, Rappler violated the memorandum after the grace period provided by the SEC,
Your Honor,
and that
and
is
Mr.
on
Speaker,
May
it can be
2014. No
done
further
again.
questions.
That memorandum circular can be done again.
Okay, Marianne. You've got 4 minutes now to rebut Irvin and advance your argument on why it would not be beneficial to consider the revocation of Rappler's certificate of registration as a violation of free speech and press freedom.
What cannot be legally done directly cannot be done indirectly. Your honors and fellow speakers, good evening. As second speaker, I will talk about two things. Firstly is how the issuance of these PDRs indirectly circumvents the statutory laws against foreign equity participation in mass media. And secondly, how the foreign entities' influence in the management of Rappler's corporate affairs is detrimental to public interest. The Philippine Stock Exchange defined the Philippine depositary receipts as a security granting the holder the right to the delivery of sale of the underlying share. Like Rappler, GMA and ABS-CBN issued these PDRs to obtain additional funds for its operations. But what is so peculiar and what is so distinct with the PDRs issued by Rappler is the pertinent provision embraced therein, stating that number one, Rappler is required to discuss corporate matters and seek the approval of the on-media PDR holders through 2/3 votes before it can amend the Articles of Incorporation and bylaws. It also bears to note that any breach of such contract is a sufficient ground for the claim of damages. This fails the test enunciated in the recent case of Roy versus Herbosa, where the Supreme Court ruled that in order to determine whether or not there is compliance with the Filipino equity requirement under the Constitution, mere legal title is not enough. One must also have full beneficial ownership of such shares. In this case, Rappler stockholders do not have full beneficial ownership. Yes, Your Honor.
Madam Speaker, could the SEC could it have just voided that part of the contract and still not revoke that the registration of Rappler?
No, Your Honor, because the duty of the SEC is to uphold the Constitution as well as the implementing rules and regulation of SRC. And it's stated there in the implementing rules and regulation that the moment that you do not comply with the Filipino equity requirement, it can be a valid ground for the cancellation of the permit. Continuing, Your Honor, Rappler stockholders do not have full beneficial ownership because they cannot fully decide and vote on corporate matters without any influence from ON. What is even more harmful is that it gives unbridled discretion on the part of On-Media to determine and define the acts prejudicial to it and intercept Rappler's corporate actions. These are the dangers foreseen by the SEC leading to its revocation. In application, it violates not only the Constitution, but also, yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Speaker, would it not be more prudent to wait for an actual instance wherein that kind of ownership disrupts with the operations of Rappler rather than revoking the registration, which constitutes prior restraint? What do you think?
Your Honor, the threat is not imagined. It is real, Your Honor. It's the SEC's duty to protect, to uphold the Constitution and also protect any influence from foreign entities. In applications, it violates not only the Constitution but also the Foreign Investment Act, the Securities Regulation Code, and the Anti-Dummy Act, when these laws clearly stated that mass media must be fully and wholly owned by Filipinos. The SEC even issued the SEC Memorandum Number 8, strengthening such laws. Rappler cannot just feign ignorance of these issuances. Ignorance of the law excuses no one. I have proven to you, Your Honors and speakers, that controlling influence exists on the part of the PDR holders. But more than control, the primordial consideration is the threat posed by the influence of these foreign entities. It is a well-settled rule that mass media is clothed with public interest. Its role in the transmission of information influence Filipinos' actions in the exercise of their civil and political rights. As stated in the case of Heirs of Gamboa versus Teves, opening to foreign control what the Constitution has expressly reserved to Filipinos would be a betrayal of the Constitution and of the national interest. Thank you.
2 minutes for the cross-examination.
Ms. Speaker, have you read the SEC decision?
Of course.
In the dispositive portion, the first one is the voiding of the omitter PDR. Am I correct? It was voided. It was voided. The second number was the revocation of the incorporation of Rappler. So to begin with, the problem has already been addressed. There's no more foreign ownership alleged to speak of because the omitter PDR was already voided.
No.
Now, let's go to piercing. Are you aware that the general rule is that two corporations are separate, enjoy separate juridical personality?
Yes.
And in rare circumstances only will we invoke.
No, there are valid grounds, of course. The other ego
this
doctrine.
is not present in this case.
It's present. It's present in this case.
So, Mr. Speaker, SEC revoked Rappler Incorporated Certificate and Rappler Holdings Certificate. Am I correct?
Yes.
Both was revoked. So the two certificate for the two corporations. Am I correct?
Yes.
The alleged violation was a clause in the omitter PDR, which was already voided. Am I correct?
Even if it's omitted, the fact is
the
still
one who
violated.
issued PDR was Rappler Holdings Incorporated. Am I
the
correct?
in the Constitution.
It was Rappler Holdings Incorporated. So the one engaged in mass media was Rappler Incorporated and not Rappler Holdings Incorporated. Are you aware that that holding companies do not
categorical
there's no
questions again, Mr. Speaker.
on ownership on holding companies? Part that on holding companies there are no restrictions on foreign.
Again, the other ego doctrine applies in this case.
It doesn't apply. Do you know the consequences of revocation?
What? Pardon?
Do you know the consequences of revocation?
Yes.
Have you taken out corporation law?
Of course.
Revocation leads to dissolution.
What?
The revocation leads to this dissolution. So that's the only thing left for the corporation.
And it's
now,
justified
again on the
SEC
decision, what quantum of evidence was applied? Substantial evidence, not the constitutional test.
Break it up, guys. Let's now hear from the third affirmative speaker, Carla. You've got 4 minutes to tell us why it would be practicable to deem the government's shuttering of news website Rappler as a violation of Constitution.
It is ironic, ladies and gentlemen, that our opponents have the luxury of defending an action that crippled free speech and the free press, yet here they are, able to do so precisely because of that same free speech and the free press. Good evening, Your Honors. The moment negative came in today's debate, limiting this debate to the issue of compliance, they already lost. It's also ironic how the previous speaker mentioned Roy versus Herbosa when the Supreme Court en banc equated control in that case of a nationalized company with the power to elect its board, as the control of a company is shared by the stockholders and the board of directors. Proceeding to my constructives. The affirmative side believes that it is practicable for the Court of Appeals to strike down the SEC decision revoking Rappler Inc.'s certificate of registration. This is based on 2 points. First, the Court of Appeals has not only the power, but also the duty to correct erroneous decisions of quasi-judicial agencies, such as SEC, as espoused in Rule 43 of our Rules of Court. Second, assuming but never conceding that indeed the Omidyar PDR needed clarification, the measure imposed was too severe and contrary to established jurisprudence disfavoring the solutions of corporations. My first point. Rule 43 espouses appeals from judgments of quasi-judicial agencies, including SEC. Now, fact, it was Rappler Holdings, not Rappler Inc., who issued those PDRs containing the veto clause or the veto power. It's also a fact that in the case of Roque versus Comelec, the Supreme Court categorically stated that veto clauses does not equate to ceding control. Hence, the revocation, having no leg to stand on, was an error of both fact and law and constituted a violation of the fundamental right to free speech and a free press. Proceeding to my second point. As shown in a long line of cases decided by both SEC and the Supreme Court, we do not sever the head to cure a headache. In the matter of Star Connection Inc., it was SEC who ruled that the drastic remedy of dissolving a corporation must be exercised with great caution and never in doubtful cases. The corporation must be given an opportunity to correct any misdeed, and the harsh penalty of dissolution will never be decreed unless no other remedy is available. Now, in Gamboa versus Teves, a corporation that failed to meet a nationalization requirement was given a curing period of 1 year to cure their deficiencies. Sadly, ladies and gentlemen, Rappler was not given the same. Your Honors, it is also important to note that the injury brought about by revoking a corporation certificate of registration is irreparable. Mass media corporations, unlike any other corporations engaged in nationalist activities, are issued only a single certificate. The revocation of that single certificate spells death for that corporation axiomatically, and a dead corporation is silenced forever. Your Honor, as of this very moment, there's even no legally and actually Rappler Inc. to speak of. Now, this is further aggravated by the fact that Rappler Inc.'s activity involved an exercise of a fundamental right. This shows that the revocation of Rappler certificate was never just a compliance issue. It became a constitutional issue when the fundamental right was disregarded. Yes, Your Honor?
Are you saying that there was malice in the revocation of Rappler's certificate of registration?
It's not for us to determine, Your Honor, but we believe that the decision was an error in fact of law because SEC actually misappreciated the definition or the word control and used its own definition, used its own interpretation, despite SEC's decision or established jurisprudence doing otherwise. Proceeding. This shows us that the revocation of Rappler certificate was never just a compliance issue, but a constitutional issue from the very start, when their fundamental right was disregarded and transgressed with impunity. Clearly, the Court of Appeals has to step in. Thank you.
2 minutes for the cross-examination.
You've read Star Connection.
Yes.
You're familiar with the case and the facts.
Yes.
Are they analogous to the situation at hand?
Does it need to?
Because it involved failure to hold meetings, something trivial. And the same, have you read El Hogar?
Yes, it was cited in Star Holders.
Yes,
right?
it involved trivial misdemeanors. Is it similar to this case?
In Star Connection does not
Therefore,
say
no.
The facts of El
Therefore,
Hogar
no.
and Star Connection is different.
This case
Yet El
involves
Hogar was
a
applied in Star
constitutional
Connection.
issue.
How is that
No,
so,
thank
Mr.
you.
Speaker?
Have you read the SEC decision?
Of course.
It's 29 pages, right?
Yes.
Does it contain a dispositive portion?
Yes.
Did it take 5 months for the SEC special panel to decide?
Yes.
Therefore,
the curing period
it
is 1
wasn't.
year, right,
No,
Mr.
thank
Speaker?
you. No, thank you.
So
therefore,
5 months is not 1 year.
It was not an arbitrary decision by the SEC.
Do you know the length
time?
of an
Did they
actual
take
SEC
time?
case,
Did they
Mr.
take
Speaker?
time to decide this issue?
Do you know the
Did
length
they
of actual cases,
investigate
Mr. Speaker?
the documents
Is it normal?
presented by Rappler?
Is it normal
Did
to decide
they
in 5
present
months, Mr. Speaker?
their logical and valid reasons in the dispositive portion of the SEC? You're not answering my questions.
Okay, what's the question?
So, does it contain a dispositive portion?
Yes.
Does it cite legal basis?
If you call that legal, yes.
Does it cite legal basis?
Of course.
Does the dispositive portion make reference to the documents submitted by Rappler?
Yes.
Were these documents voluntarily submitted by Rappler?
There was a show cause order.
Was it submitted
Yes.
voluntarily by Rappler?
It was submitted by Rappler.
Therefore, the SEC had within its hands all the documents it needed in order to make a decision. Correct?
Did you say that, Mr. Speaker, or does SEC say
that the SEC have the documents necessary to make a
that?
determination?
An erroneous decision.
Did they have the documents necessary?
Ross, you've got 4 minutes now to rebut Carlo and to advance your argument on why the proposition regarding the revocation of Rappler's certificate of registration is in this case not practicable.
Your Honors, a free press requires not just freedom from government control, but also freedom from foreign control, foreign influence, and foreign threats. And it is the entry of foreign influence in our press and media that no matter how benign or imperceptible, that is the real attack on press freedom. Government has ignored the very glaring flaw in Rappler's petition to the Court of Appeals, where it categorically states it is not a member of the mass media and it is not a member of the press. And yet time and time again, Rappler has demanded it to be treated like radio when radio broadcasting in the case of Rappler versus Bautista, and has insisted on its membership in the Malacanang Press Club and demanding the same rights for its journalists. But however, we must see, ladies and gentlemen, in defining what mass media is and what the press is, we look to the Constitution and what the Constitution is intended to be. Yes, ma'am.
Is it your position, Mr. Speaker, that the revocation is actually upholding the freedom of speech and freedom of the press?
Yes, ma'am, because in order for there to be a free press, the free press must be free from foreign control. That is the essence of the freedom of the press. We see, ladies and gentlemen, that the Constitution must be construed in light of the current times. It must continue to govern not only the present, but look forward to the future. We must look into the ratio legis est anima of the law. What does the law want to prevent, and what is the objective of the Constitution? It wants to prevent, ladies and gentlemen, the influence of foreign media. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, when Rappler created Rappler Holdings Corporation, it tried to circumvent through this loophole the prohibition against the Constitution. It tried to indirectly do what it was prohibited from directly doing. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, the pedantic and narrow constitutional construction of Rappler in its petition to the Court of Appeals is one that would prevent the fulfillment of the Constitution. Yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker, is your side trying to protect the freedom of the Filipino press or just the freedom of the press in general?
Your Honor, we in the negative side want to protect the freedom of the press here in the country, and that is why we want to make sure that the Filipino press is free from all forms of foreign interference. We see, ladies and gentlemen, that if it is not mass media, it cannot invoke the defense. If we admit Rappler's categorical admission that it is not mass media, that it cannot invoke the defense of freedom of the press as enshrined in the Bill of Rights. It cannot invoke the prescription against content regulation. It cannot invoke the chilling effect against mass media. Therefore, how can there be a violation of press freedom if Rappler itself admits it is not part of mass media? This is the fatal flaw in government's argumentation. But moreover, ladies and gentlemen, if we take a look at Rappler's petition, they cited two cases, El Hogar and Star Connection, which involved non-analogous matters because it involved trivial misdemeanors and failure to hold meetings. These are not equivalent to the violations that are that Rappler committed. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, we see that in the Foreign Investment Act, in the Anti-Dummy Act, and in the Corporation Code, it is not overkill to revoke the franchise of a corporation that has blatantly violated the Constitution. We see, ladies and gentlemen, that the PDRs and the holding companies were created as a way to circumvent the constitutional prohibitions on prescriptions against foreign control. Moreover, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of this debate, we see that this could have been prevented only if Rappler had only hired Arellano law graduates to review its contracts.
2 minutes for the cross-examination.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, sir.
Earlier, you said that SEC had 5 months to determine Rappler's violation, right? Let us review the facts of the case. December 14, 2016, the OSG letter was sent requesting for an investigation, correct?
Yes.
February 2017, the conference was held. Rappler gave a copy of a PDR,
Yes.
correct? Yes. July 2017, SEC conducted a formal investigation regarding the nature of the PDRs, correct?
Yes.
Yes. September 2017, an order of production for the documents was released.
Yes.
Rappler complied, correct? In those instances, was Rappler told that what they did was wrong? No. Was Rappler told that they had to remove the PDR? No. How about the clause? Still no. They were only told only on January 2018. Do you know what happened on January 2018?
Yes, they were revoked.
Yes, you know what happened, Mr. Speaker. The decision to revoke was released. Now, were they given a chance to remedy the
They
situation?
were already
no.
past the
No,
they
assuming
already
that they
passed
were
the
told from the
curative
very
period.
start.
It was 5 years
Answer the
after
question.
the
Answer the
SEC
question.
memorandum
Mr. Speaker,
number 8.
answer the
They had
question.
been violating the Constitution for
Okay,
5
now,
years.
the decision of SEC said that the ONPDR agreements gives Omidjar some form of control, right?
Yes.
That's their legal basis. That's not only stock ownership, but
Even
other
if you
schemes
void
that
the
grants
PDRs, a
What's the
crime
question,
was
Mr.
still
Speaker?
committed.
Answer the question. Yes or no? I'll take that as a yes. Are you aware that the Supreme Court had its own definition of control? Gamboa versus Teves.
The
Control was
the
either
SRC
vested
has
in the
its own definition
stockholders
of control
or in
as
the
well.
directors of the corporation. Control basically is the right to vote and the exercise of the business judgment
The
by the board
SRC
of
also
directors.
defines control
Now,
differently.
who do you think prevails, Mr. Speaker? SC's interpretation or SEC's
Obviously, the
interpretation?
Supreme Court.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Now, do you even listen to my second speaker? Yes. Then you heard that issuing PDRs is perfectly allowable. In fact, SEC sanctioned it. Now, Mr. Speaker, let me ask you this question.
PDRs are valid, but we look at the wording of the PDR of Omidjar.
And with that, we end the debate proper. We now invite both sides to cross the House as our judges tally the scores. Attorney Pomoy, how did the affirmative side do tonight?
So the affirmative side, you did well in presenting the subject matter and your position. So there's a clear grasp of the subject, and we appreciate the extensive research. However, we would like also to see an improvement in the responsiveness, especially in the clarifications of the judges, as well as consistency in the position, as there are some areas where matters need to be more consistent as among the three speakers. But overall, it was well done for the affirmative defense, for the affirmative side. Thank you.
And Attorney Palapel, how did the negative side do?
The negative side did well in preparing for this match. This understandably is a position that not anyone would be very happy to take, but you stuck to your research and to the position of a legal researcher and a legal analyst, and you tried to answer it the way the law would answer it. There were a few inconsistencies in the points as well, but overall, the negative side did a good job. Congratulations.
Now let's hear from our chief adjudicator, Judge Samadan. Who did the judges pick for best speaker?
First off, I would like to congratulate both teams. The debate was very, very hot. So hot that I was really not comfortable in my seat anymore during the last phase of the debate. The debaters gave sound and solid arguments to support their respective positions. However, in tonight's debate, the best speaker is no other than Mr. Carlo Aguiliana from the Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Carlo, and the school that won this round.
I would say that the better team for tonight's debate is the affirmative side. Congratulations, Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila Law School.
A big congratulations to the Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila for winning the second elimination round of Season 15. Next week, Ateneo de Davao University and the University of the Philippines will face off in Round 3. I'm Mike Yoreta. Thank you for watching.